and me both know all of the Yonkos in One Piece, of course, but do you really know the insane truths about how each one of them actually became an emperor to begin with? Well, today, we're gonna break this down, starting with my boy Luffy, of course, who officially became an emperor by doing something that almost never happens. Because Luffy, of course, defeated another Yonko. Yeah, because after taking down Kaido in Wano, Luffy was officially named an emperor for the first time, and more importantly, acknowledged by the rest of the top dogs in the world. Which is actually very important to note, I think, because the emperor title is kind of a media creation anyways in One Piece, as people like Big News Morgans can declare someone an emperor without any official set of criteria. Just like we saw with when the newspapers were calling Luffy the 5th emperor already after Whole Cake Island, but most of the upper tier pirates and marines knew that Luffy still wasn't really yet at that level. But anyways, Luffy is an actual Yonko now, and there is no stopping him from reaching his true goal, because like every other Yonko, Luffy now has the true power it takes to achieve his dreams and reach the top. And while some Yonko's goals, as we're gonna see, are complex plots that involve tons of territory and politics and planning, well, Luffy simply wants to be the freest man in the world, protect his friends, and find the One Piece. Plus there's of course his secret dream that is supposedly the same as Goldie Rogers, but we don't know any more than that quite yet. Oh, and he definitely wants an endless supply of meat, yeah. Can't forget that one. But since we already know so much about Luffy, let's quickly move on. But speaking of his friends though, we've seen Luffy gather his main crew all throughout the story, from his childhood in Fuchsia Village to his journey through the East Blue and into the Grand Line, but you do know that his status as a real world power took a major step forward in Dressrosa when all of these guys here pledged their loyalty to Luffy. To me, this is kind of the moment that Oda basically told the rest of the world, yeah, you better watch out for this guy here. And on top of that, Luffy has a few territories under his direct protection at this point, like Fishman Island or Wano, so there's some real muscle to back up Luffy if he ever actually needs it, which is definitely gonna be the case. But since Luffy's the main character, we of course knew a lot about him. However, there's a lot more mystery about the other emperors, especially the man that Luffy took down to claim his title to begin with. Because now I want to talk about Kaido, the world's strongest creature, the king of the beasts. And you might remember that this man was basically considered to be so unbeatable that even Oda claimed that he didn't really know how Luffy would ever defeat him. Oda did say it couldn't just be one big punch, which is of course exactly what happened anyways, because that's what always happens. But let's back up here for a moment, because even though Kaido was a Yonko at this point for decades, you may not know about his life before becoming an emperor. First off, we do know that Kaido grew up in a place called the Vodka Kingdom, kind of fitting for a drunk little Kaido, but even at a young age, he was just such a monstrous fighter that the kingdom would just send him out to steal from other countries so that the Vodka Kingdom would be able to pay the heavenly tribute to the Celestial Dragons, the tax that all world government affiliated countries have to pay. He didn't last long here though, because his king then basically just sold him to the Marines, but this didn't really bother Kaido as much because this dude has so much swag that every time the Marines caught him, he would just eat all the food on the Marine ship and then just escape like he was walking out of an all-you-can-eat buffet and, you know, just not paying his bill. But to be fair, not all of his captures ended up being quite as simple though, because Kaido was also experimented on multiple times throughout his life, and we don't really know how they got him to do this or why he didn't just escape from that place right away. Maybe he just liked it, maybe he didn't really care, I don't know, but one of these times is when he met his right-hand man, King here, and since that day, these two built a crew of pure monsters and then eventually took control of Wano. Now you know of course that Kaido has been famous for making his entire army as much as possible straight out of Zoan Fruit users, but did you know that all three of his top officers most likely did not have their devil fruits before joining Kaido? You see, there was another guy who used to work for Kaido called Hanafuda, and Oda recently dropped a real gold mine of information about this guy, including the most important thing maybe, that this was a former warlord who was kind of a bounty hunter person for Kaido, who kind of went around the Grand Line collecting zone fruits to ship off back to the big bad guy in Wano. But all of this only could happen after the first pirate crew that Kaido was a part of finally broke up. Of course, we're talking about none other than the legendary Rocks Pirates. Now, during his time on the crew, we saw that Kaido took part in the raid on God Valley, and it was right here that Kaido got his hands on a really truly legendary devil fruit. After the Rocks Pirates were defeated here though, he kind of started just forming his own crew. Sure, we don't know when he officially became an emperor timeline-wise, but when your hobby is turning nations into weapon factories like he did with Wano, and in extension kind of like Dressrosa and all these places that worked for him too, you tend to get noticed. What's most interesting though is that even with all of Kaido's power and strength, this man couldn't really achieve his dreams. There are hints that he knew about the existence of Joy Boy and possibly even thought that he himself could become Joy Boy, but clearly that didn't happen. Didn't work out that well, and I think it sent him into this horrible drunk phase where he just wanted to end it all and kind of force out the next Joy Boy by starting a really big war. Of course, once he then teamed up with Big Mom, they decided to really go all out with destroying the entire world, but clearly the new generation then stomped his dreams into pieces, though ironically enough, Luffy awakening Gear 5 kind of fulfilled Kaido's dream, so maybe it all worked out for him. And so overall, I think we can say it's incredibly likely that Kaido became an emperor because he took over the country of Wano. Now, while Kaido never really found his own happiness, the one emperor who truly found their calling in life was no one else than Edward Newgate, aka Whitebeard, Kaido's old crew member. Because let me tell you, this dude just kind of wanted to chill. Seriously, just give my man a tropical island, some homies, and this man's gonna be good. I mean, didn't really need anything else here because Whitebeard's only real goal in life was to be a father figure to his entire crew who he considered his family. Alright, you got me. That's not entirely true. Whitebeard had another job, a real secret mission that most people didn't even realize or know about. Because before Whitebeard became an emperor, there really were no other Yonko in the One Piece world, at least as far as we know so far. There was of course Roger, the Pirate King, and then kind of everyone else. But once Roger found the One Piece and learned the true history, then things really got weird. With that, the Great Pirate Era had begun, and Whitebeard was the biggest pirate around after Roger's passing, so I imagine that he was instantly thought of as the next great pirate, which is probably what started the entire Yonko system altogether. Notably, Whitebeard himself didn't want to find the One Piece though, and according to Roger and his crew, the time wasn't right for someone else to find and use the One Piece anyways. That's why Roger had a son, and that's why Whitebeard's true purpose as a Yonko was to keep the world in balance so that everything and everyone was ready for when the truly, prophesized next person could come along and inherited Roger's and Joy Boy's will. And I hope you agree that it's kind of giving off strong, keep everything like this until the main character arrives kind of energy. Now, of course, Roger and Whitebeard both thought that would probably be Ace, but yeah, oopsie, that didn't work out either. That's kind of a theme with all the Yonko so far. Luffy throws a wrench into all of their plans. But you might now be wondering why all of this even matters. Well, it was important that Whitebeard essentially kept the peace in the entire New World and large parts of the Grand Line. As a result, no one else made any major moves during all of this time, so I think it's fair to say that Whitebeard was kind of like that one tough dad who kept the wild kids from burning down the block, if that makes sense to you. But he didn't do all of this by himself. No, he had pretty much the largest main crew in the history of One Piece, with literally over 1,000 pirates all working with and under him, and of course his 16 division commanders. Each of these division commanders had their own ship and 100 men at least working under them. So I think we can safely call this a fleet, not just a crew. And on top of that, he also had a ton of other allied pirate captains who would come to fight for him whenever needed, like we saw of course with the war at Marineford. But the crazy thing is that Whitebeard mostly took in all of the scrubs and outcasts that he found in the One Piece world. Chances are that if you were a pirate and needed a home, the Whitebeard pirates would probably take you in if they found you a decent person, which is something I can really respect honestly, especially considering Whitebeard grew up on a poor island and then later used his powers to help the island with his own money and resources. Speaking of that power though, Whitebeard had basically the most busted devil fruit in the entire story with the Tremor fruit. And while it's not exactly clear where or when he got that fruit, it is possible that he got it during the raid on God Valley when he was working with the Rocks Pirates. So yeah, chalk up another famous Rocks crew member as a Yonko, another theme that will be happening throughout this video. And come on, we all know that Whitebeard was a great father figure to his crew, but this next emperor is quite literally the mother of her entire crew, because Big Mom here took the family concept to a slightly unhealthy level maybe, I don't know, you tell me, and made her entire crew out of her children. Yeah, that's right. Ever since she was 18 years old, she's been popping out at least one kid a year. That means even while she was sailing with Rock. So at this point, even her kids have kids. It's kind of like she's unlocked the infinite pirate crew cheat code in a really messed up way, if you'd like to formulate it that way. Now, similarly to Kaido, we don't have an actual date or event when she exactly became a Yonko. There isn't this one thing where everyone was like, yeah, that's it, that's the one. But of course, she has the #1 criteria for old gen Yonko or first gen Yonko, which was #1, to be a part of Rox's crew. Then her soul devil fruit powers, which is extremely broken as well. And of course, her army of children, which includes some crazy powerhouses too, like Katakuri. So the world might have just been like, yeah, this girl is Yonko material, and I would personally assume that once she established her kingdom and rule of, Whole Cake Island and got her hands on a road poneglyph is when she really got recognized as a Yonko by everyone. Now, up until Wano, her purpose as a Yonko was really mostly to just build her own little utopia in Totland. Even though she was collecting some poneglyphs and making some progress towards Laugh Tale, she wasn't really on a path going all out finding the One Piece. If we're being real here, she was more or less just trying to fill the hole in her heart after being abandoned by her parents in Elbaf, and then thinking her other parent figure, Mother Caramel, left her behind as well. Well, she kind of didn't. Now, all of this left Big Mom with some serious childhood regrets and trauma, but our next emperor truly missed out on a chance of a lifetime. Like, no one missed out more than this next Yonko, because this guy got sick and thus had to miss going to freaking Laugh Tale. You know him as Buggy the Clown, I know him as the real future king of the pirates. Yeah, no joking with that one. Buggy stocks have just only been going up the entire story, way up ever since being launched out of Orange Town by Luffy, and I'm placing all of my bets that Buggy will somehow fail into the position of becoming Pirate King, whether it be before or after Luffy, it's gonna happen. Very much like how he became a warlord and then a Yonko, even though he's treated like a doormat by the true powerhouses of Cross Guilds, Mihawk, and Crocodile. Let's do back up here though, because Buggy is proof that you don't have to be just strong. Just really, really lucky, and it just goes to show that the titles of Yonko are based on things like territory and the power of your overall fleet. And Buggy has certainly got that brand recognition at this point for the media to call him a Yonko, but the whole reason Buggy did become an emperor is that the world government took that whole warlord system and said, oh, we ain't doing that anymore. And that of course left a big problem for former warlords like Crocodile and especially Mihawk, because now the world government was truly on their tail. So how this all went down is that Croc called Mihawk and said, hey, let's team up against these bums. And then they came to Buggy because, well, he owed Croc some money and they figured they could just use his delivery service infrastructure to start building their own little empire. But then of course, as things happened, Buggy got all the credit for bringing in these two powerhouses, which is what truly pumped him up to emperor level, because hey, if he can recruit Mihawk and Crocodile as his subordinates, he must be pretty powerful. And the rest of the gang is literally made up of Buggy's followers from Impel Down and also his original crewmates, plus of course just whatever other ragtag pirates joined Buggy's delivery service during the time skip. But we gotta say, all of these are probably fairly powerful pirates. They just think that Buggy is powerful, which he probably is not, unless he's playing some insane 4D chess for literally the entire story. And to his credit, Buggy is not letting this chance go to waste, just like how you shouldn't miss the chance to get exclusive access to bonus videos, early chapter reactions, and a bunch of exclusive content over on Patreon. If you want to support us there, link is in the description. And we have a free newsletter if you don't want to pay but still be up to date with what's happening every single week in the One Piece universe. But the whole Cross Guild organization started paying out bounties on the Marines, and that has then truly shaken up the world government. Because turns out that if you offer people money, for the first time ever, citizens are actively turning against the Marines. And while we don't know the full effects of this new system yet, really this clown just wants to finish the journey that he once started with the Roger Pirates and find the One Piece. And this whole dream started years ago. We do know about Buggy that he was born somewhere in the Grand Line and picked up by Roger's crew when he was only 9 years old. Now to this day, I probably won't ever understand why they chose him, but he he and Shanks then ended up being apprentices and did everything with the crew up until they were about to head to Laugh Tale when Buggy got seriously sick. And then once Roger died and the entire crew broke up, Buggy went off to form his own little small-time pirate crew and began raiding villages in the East Blue. I guess talk about a big step down from playing with the big boys, but we all do know that Buggy was just getting ready for his true rise to fame. Now there's one other orphan that is even more dangerous than Buggy though, because Marshall D. Teach doesn't just want to find the One Piece. No, that's kind of chump change for Blackbeard, because with all of his plots and schemes that he had for literal decades, he wants to quite literally rule the entire world. And the story of how he became an emperor is incredibly fascinating, but first I think with Blackbeard in particular, it's important to start with his childhood here, because as far as we know, he was an orphan that Whitebeard then picked up here in the island of Shadeport. Now, who were his parents? Don't know. What was he doing as a child? Well, I have some thoughts, and it does revolve around Roxy Zebek, because what's a world domination plan without a little bit of family mystery subplot, am I right? I mean, seriously, Blackbeard is in love with rocks. He named his ship after the former pirate, he has the very same dream, he wanted the same devil fruit, or at least we can presume that's what happened. Blackbeard then took over Roxas Island as his own headquarters, so a big part of me really thinks that there is some deeper connection between these two that we are still not aware about. It could of course just be as simple as Blackbeard finding Roxas' personal journal, or something much crazier like Blackbeard having Roxas' soul literally inside of him. I don't know what the truth is quite yet. We have a lot of theory videos on this channel about it if you're curious, but we're just gonna have to wait and see for now. More importantly, Blackbeard then hung out on Whitebeard's crew for about 26 years, the majority of his life, waiting to find the Darkness Devil Fruit, and when he did, all of Teach's plans truly kicked into high gear. He murdered his friend, stole the Devil Fruit, left the crew, and then started his own crew with these guys right here. He then had a plan to become a warlord so he could then break into Impel Down. This then let him find even more insanely powerful crewmates, and finally managed to kill Whitebeard to take his Devil Fruit and become the very first person in the story to ever wield 2 Devil Fruit powers at the same time. And then the next step in his plan to become a Yonko was completed during the time skip when Blackbeard destroyed what was left over of Whitebeard's crew and then took over most of his territory. And finally with Blackbeard, we do know specifically the time and events that led to him becoming a Yonko, defeating the Whitebeard pirates, and also taking over Beehive Island during the Rocky Port incident. But it seems that becoming a Yonko has not stopped Blackbeard's plots and ambitions at all, because since then he and his crew have been hunting powerful Devil Fruit users to steal their abilities, and Blackbeard's basically playing Devil Fruit Pokemon at this point. Gotta steal them all, I guess. The former Admiral Kuzan has joined his crew, and recently Blackbeard has announced that he now wants to become an official kingdom of the world government and a king in exchange for hostage marines like Kobe or Garp. This guy is insane and probably the biggest schemer in the story, and there is still so much more to learn about him, including his so-called special lineage and how he plans to finally take over the world. But there is of course another person besides Luffy who could step in and stop Blackbeard. I'm looking at you, another orphan, red hair Shanks, and oh boy, there was a time that we all thought that Shanks was a pretty simple dude. He just likes to hang out with the boys and have a drink, but my man, we were so wrong and things have changed a lot. He's not just a super powerful former Roger pirate who's gonna help Luffy find the One Piece. No, turns out that he's actually the son of one of the worst Celestial Dragon families, and he may not even want to help Luffy at all, but instead might just be using him for his own mysterious plans. And at this point we have a 99% confirmation of why and when Shanks became a Yonko, because we do know that Shanks became one 6 years ago, but we didn't know why until the Elbaf arc in the manga, because 6 years ago Shanks was like, hold my sake bro, I'm gonna catch a giant that's insanely broken, and that giant turned out to be the cursed Prince Loki, who we now know was out at sea rampaging and probably causing all sorts of chaos out in the world. And this titanic clash of Shanks capturing Loki, bringing him back to Elbaf and tying up there is very, very much guaranteed to be what made him an emperor. But let's back up here for a second, because if you thought that Blackbeard was a careful schemer and planner, well, let me introduce you to the man who has been pulling the strings in the Grand Line for literal decades now, and it all ties into why Shanks became a Yonko in the first place. Because like we said with Whitebeard, Roger knew that the world wasn't ready yet for whatever they found on Laugh Tale, and so they made a plan to set the world up for his son. And it very much seems like Shanks was part of that plan, or maybe even the centerpiece, the child of destiny. After all, he joined the crew as a baby when Roger picked him up from God Valley. Then he traveled the seas with them for years until Roger disbanded his crew and Shanks formed his own crew after being told something by Roger. He then stole Luffy's devil fruit from a government ship, maybe even after it was stolen there from Elbaf, and then brought it to Dawn Island, where we originally thought he was gonna give it to Ace, or maybe just straight up eat it himself, because it does seem like he was supposed to be the next Joy Boy. But Luffy, of course, changed all of that, and ever since then, Shanks has become the peacekeeper for the New World by minimizing the conflicts just like Whitebeard has. Think about it, he tried to keep Ace from going after Blackbeard, he stopped Kaido from coming to Marineford, and stopped the Summit War altogether, all on his own. All so that Luffy could now have a clearer and safer path to grow stronger and become Pirate King. But boy, have things changed since then, because Shanks has now claimed that it is time for him to go after the One Piece finally too. So is Shanks really gonna help Luffy, or does he want the One Piece kind of for himself? I really don't know. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because there's a lot of potential here for a complex motivation where maybe Shanks was following Roger's plans for years, but then decided he wanted to find the One Piece himself and take things into his own hands. Since we now also know that Shanks actually went up and stayed in the Holy Land for a certain period of time, there could be some Figaland family shenanigans at play here too, and I could actually see all of that playing out and being a big conflict between the Red Hair Pirates and the Straw Hats at some point in the story. And I mean, let's be real, that would certainly be an epic clash because the crews are honestly pretty similar. Both crews are fairly small, but Shanks is specifically known for being extremely powerful across the board. Everyone on his crew can hold their own in a top tier fight, and I'm not sure we can say the same thing about the Straw Hats at this point. I mean, the Red Hair Pirates are also unique in the way that they don't have a single Devil Fruit user, not one, so that can't be a coincidence, right? There's just no way that that won't be important, so don't be surprised if there's some major downside to Devil Fruits that show up at the end of the story. Shanks also has some other allied captains, but these guys are all kind of scrubs who Shanks just protects rather than actual strong pirate crews that are useful in battle. But let's be real here, as strong as Shanks' crew is, pretty much no crew in history was ever as broken as the Rocks pirates themselves, kind of the OG Yonko before the Yonko were a thing. I mean, again, Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Shiki, and a bunch of other characters, including Rocks himself. Like, the Rocks pirates were basically the pirate Avengers, except way more evil and way more chaotic. We know that this was easily the single most feared crew in history, and it took Roger and the hero of the Marines garb to take all of them down, and honestly, I'm not even certain that this really went down as a straight up brawl as we all kind of think. There's a lot of evidence that there is much more to the story here, because Rocks was the big dog before Roger, and if there was a Yonko system before Roger found the One Piece, it pretty much started and ended with Rocks. And as we can see, his entire crew affected the world for literal decades after his death, with many of his crewmates going on to become emperors in the future as well, also inspiring Blackbeard plans for taking over the world. But despite being like the OG Yonko, there are still so many major questions with him. Like, where did he come from? Did he know about Emu? And maybe most importantly, did he tell something to Roger during the God Valley incident? Well, if you want to know why I think that Rocks actually passed on secret knowledge to Roger and everything else that happened on God Valley, you can check out that video right here. Otherwise, as always, Shanks so much for watching, Shanks so much to all of our great Patreons, and I will see you in the next video.